Well, good evening, everyone. Michael, soothing here, back with a new soft-spoken saga. Tonight, I thought what I would do for something a little different. By the way, I'm going to do a little chewing gum while I do this. Big League Chew. I believe Joanne did a video earlier today because she pulled all of that flavor. What flavor is it? Out of here original. That shredded chewing gum out and put it on this tissue. Looks like a bunch of really skinny French fries or carrots or something. But anyway, if I get to it, I'll chew a little bit of gum later in the video. But right now, what I want to talk about is a very well-known documentary series on Netflix called The Making of a Murderer. The series is about this guy right here. Believe it or not, this is all the same guy, no matter which one you're looking at. And here's a guy named Stephen Avery. Sorry that the camera doesn't auto-correct for the laptop lighting. As you can see, he has many faces, right? Look at that one in the upper. Remember that Beatles tune? I Am the Walrus. Anyway, the other character in this saga is a guy named Brendan Dassey. Here's Brendan Dassey. And that's his nephew, okay? And Brendan Dassey is accused, along with him, of committing a murder. And the murder they committed was someone named Teresa Halbach. And what I want to talk about is how interesting it is that a documentary like this can create so much controversy between people who are absolutely sure that these two guys are innocent based on the Netflix documentary, and those who are absolutely sure that these two guys are guilty. As you know, I've always been interested in true crime because, of course, I did that Jodi Arias series. And I am going to do a follow-up video on her someday. But I think I'll do it on this channel, ASMR, instead of my crazy other persona who's so hyperactive back when she was on trial. Anyway, why is this series or this murder story more interesting than others? Why was a documentary done on Netflix spanning several, I forget how many segments, 1 hour segments, a whole series? Season 1 was, I think, 10 or 12 segments. Season 2 is the same. And I think there'll be a season 3 because the story's not over yet. Well, what is the story, you might say, if you're not familiar with it? And if you are familiar, please don't hold me to absolute accuracy about the details, because I'm just going to give my paraphrased general impressions of this documentary series while chewing some gum. I'll tell you what I think eventually. And so if I get a couple of the facts wrong because of my memory, I'm not going to try to do this with 100% accuracy. What does that resemble to you? It could be many things, couldn't it? It's moving. It could be the precursor to the alien, the Prometheus alien, that coalesced out of particles, nanoparticles. Anyway, let me wad this up into an edible ball, somewhat edible ball of gum. I've had requests to do conspiracy video, which I think is a great idea. Conspiracy theories and my opinion about them. This documentary is indeed a conspiracy theory, because the theory of the Netflix documentary is that Stephen Avery, the primary bad actor in this murder drama, was totally framed by cops or by others or both. And there's some pretty good reasons why they present their video this way, their documentary this way. For example, in Stephen Avery's history, in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, up by the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, I think, Stephen Avery was tried and convicted for a violent rape sex crime. And it turned out that the authorities had the wrong guy. He spent 18 years in prison for that conviction. And it turned out that the state had hidden evidence, and when a cop had called the officer in charge of the investigation and said, "You've got the wrong guy," and for good reasons, and that cop said, "Don't worry about it." Eventually, DNA testing proved that Stephen Avery could not have been the guy that did it, and the guy that did do it confessed to the crime. So, Stephen Avery sued the state after improperly losing 18 years of his life. He sued the state for $36 million. And he was going after the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, who had done some of the improper misdeeds, as well as the judge at trial and the DA. Just about the time that this civil case for the $36 million, oh, by the way, he was of course released from prison when it was found he had been innocent of that crime, 18 years after being there. And just about the time his civil suit for that wrongful conviction and imprisonment was going to be heard, a young lady named Teresa Halbach disappeared and was murdered. And evidence found on Steve Avery's property indicated that he is or was the murderer. However, very strangely, the very people who should not have been investigating it, which was the ones who had a lot to lose in the civil trial, inserted themselves into this murder investigation and did many improper things, and all kinds of bizarre things happened with evidence against Stephen Avery. For example, Teresa Halbach, her job was to go around for Auto Trader magazine and photograph cars and vans and such, and to have those photos and ads put in their magazine for sale. The last place she is known to have gone was to Stephen Avery's residence to photograph a van for sale. And she was driving a Toyota RAV4, which was later found on the Avery property. The Avery property being his mom and dad owned a huge piece of land which was an auto wreckers that had literally at one time thousands of vehicles on it, more than 3,000 old cars spread out on this giant acreage. That's where her vehicle was found. Back to the weird things that happened with the evidence. They went and took the Averys off of their property and did an investigation after she disappeared. And they went into Stephen Avery's trailer. By the way, to give you an idea, let's take another peek at Stephen Avery. The many faces of, just so you can get a feel for who we're talking about. I think we'll look at his most current photo. One of his most current photos here. Once again, that guy there. Okay? But over the years, he's had many looks. Let's see what else. Try this one. I think this must have been when he was trying out for a ZZ Top band audition, perhaps. You know? Just kidding. But Stephen Avery and his family, to put this charitably, might be called what they say in Filipino is badui. Badui meaning they're not in danger of breaking the high end of the IQ scale. Okay, they're not in danger. In fact, his IQ is around 69, they say, according to tests. And in the documentary series, you can see this for yourself, should you watch it on Netflix. Pardon me. I hope this ramble isn't too incoherent and boring, although it is supposed to put you to sleep, right? So let's get along with the timeline of what happened. Okay. The girl goes to the Avery property She disappears. The cops decide he's a suspect, Steve Avery. They take him off the property. They search his trailer several times over several days. They search the property, which is huge. They find her car up against a far distant part of the acreage, up against a fence, along with a bunch of other cars up there. There's boards and things leaning against it. Looked like someone was trying to hide it. They find bones from Teresa Halbach, burned bones, in a burn pit behind Stephen Avery's trailer. They find her Toyota RAV4 key in his trailer. They find some spots of his blood in the RAV4, a little smear by the ignition key area, some drops on the seat, which apparently came from a cut on his hand, and they find his DNA on a hood latch to open the engine compartment hood. They find spots of Teresa Halbach's blood in the back of the RAV4. And then, perhaps most damning of all, his nephew, a guy named Brendan Dassey, another genius in the family, whose IQ is actually even much lower than Stephen Avery's, should that be possible. This guy is in interrogation with the cops, and he says to them, when I got home from school that day, I heard a woman's voice up in my uncle's trailer. Okay, this guy lives next door in a house right close by. He got the mail. He was taking mail to his uncle's house, and he heard a woman's screams. He went to the door. His uncle supposedly lets him in, brings him into a bedroom where Teresa Halbach is chained to a bed. I hope this isn't too graphic for ASMR, but I'll leave the graphic stuff out. The gory details I'll leave out. Uncle Stephen tells him to rape the girl, tells him, Brendan, to rape the girl. And then I forget who does what, but I think the uncle stabs her in the chest, slits her throat. They take her out someplace to the garage or outside the garage and shoot her with a .22 rifle. And then he helps, I don't know, transport, helps get rid of the body. Now, that all sounds very, very damning, doesn't it? For both of them. But I guarantee you that if you start watching the Netflix series, or if you have already, you're going to be awfully confused after the first few segments, because you're going to think, these guys were framed. Why will you think that? Well, there are only a few key pieces of evidence. The burn pit behind the house, the trailer. You can't burn a body effectively in a burn pit. You have to burn it in like a cremation type thing where there's lots of radiated heat. You can't just pour gasoline and burn a body. It would take endless amounts of fuel. It doesn't work that way. All the heat's radiating into the air. You need steel walls or concrete walls. A burn barrel would work, okay? Not to be too graphic again, but it appears that this body was burned elsewhere, and then all that was left was pieces of bone which were put into the burn pit behind Steve Avery's trailer. Very strange. Why would the guy incriminate himself if the body was burned elsewhere by bringing parts of the remains right next to his house? Another odd thing, the Toyota RAV4 key that was found in his trailer. There's a photo of it when you watch the documentary. It's sitting right in plain view on the floor. And yet, in the first 3 or 4 very thorough searches, no key is found in that trailer. Mind you, that's exactly the kind of thing they're looking for. The key mysteriously appears when one cop, who happened to be the cop that had a lot to lose if Stephen Avery was not convicted, because this cop would lose the civil suit for his misdeeds in the past with Stephen Avery's erroneous conviction. Anyway, this cop keeps showing up when weird evidence pops up and appears out of nowhere. So this key appears mysteriously on the floor, like 4 days after 4 days of thorough searching, when this cop comes on the scene. And it's one of the most key pieces of evidence, if not the confession by the nephew, Brendan Dassey. The problem with the confession is, first of all, clearly the story could not have happened the way he confessed it. Because when you see Stephen Avery's trailer, that kind of a violent crime would have left evidence all over the place, even if they tried hard to clean it up. But there was no evidence of a cleanup of any kind. There was no blood from Teresa Halbach anywhere in that room, and there would have been blood everywhere. And there was no evidence of bleach or a cleanup, and it was a very cluttered, small, messy room. If you follow crime stories, as I do, it's impossible that a crime like that was committed with no evidence staying behind. We're not dealing with geniuses here. We're not dealing with Dexter, okay? They didn't put plastic all over the floor and walls first. This crime, if it happened like that, had to have happened in a very, very narrow time window, which you'll see, like 20 or 30 minutes, which you'll see if you watch the documentary. But what else about the confession? Why would the kids say these things? Well, when you watch his interrogation, he starts by saying he has nothing, he has no information or nothing, no knowledge of anything about this girl. But as the interrogation proceeds, you can see that the cops keep leading him, planting thoughts in his head and promising him. Mind you, he's extremely dim-witted, and I'm being nice, and naive. Basically telling him, we will reward you like a seal with a fish if you'll just tell us what we want to hear. That you saw your uncle doing all these things, or come up with something, right? Like, he says, will I be able to go home soon and do my... Halfway after confessing his story, giving them, a grisly story, after they keep pressing him, he says, will I be able to go home and finish my homework now? I mean, this is the kind of mind we're dealing with, okay? After supposedly confessing to a murder. So there's a great deal of question, and the cops kept, when you're interrogating someone, and only that person would know the details of the crime, you have to get them to say something no one else would know except the guilty person. But you have to get them to say it on their own, not have them parrot back to you what you say. So, for example, they say, well, after she was stabbed, what happened to her head, right? They were trying to get him to say, we shot her in the head. Because that's the theory of the crime. And the last major piece of evidence was a bullet they found in the garage. We'll get a little to that later. The strange thing about this bullet is that it's almost impossible that it could have been the bullet that killed her, or was shot through her head, and I'll explain why later. I better explain it now or I'll forget. His latest attorney, Brendan's latest attorney, and Steve Avery's latest attorney, has done some excellent forensic tests on all the key pieces of evidence. And so she did experiments and tests. When I heard that the state was showing pieces of skull, how a bullet went in and came out, and that was the final thing that killed her, and it was from a .22 caliber, I said to myself, that's not very credible, because I know that a .22 caliber doesn't have enough velocity to go through a skull on one side and then go through on the opposite side and come out clean. It just doesn't have the velocity to do that. Sure enough, they did a good experiment with a .22 rifle and high velocity ammo of the same type of the bullet they found. They got skull pieces or bone pieces from a cow that were the same thickness and composition, basically. Put a gel block in between, fired bullets in to see will they go through both pieces of bone. And the answer is no. After they go in and enter, they don't ever come out again. They don't even damage the other piece of bone because it's just not a big enough caliber with enough charge to do that. Not enough velocity. Not to get so graphic, but anyway, you find this with every piece of evidence in this case. there's a huge problem with every piece. The other problem being with this bullet. This one bullet they found, right? They did all this testing. No bone matter on the bullet at all. All these test bullets they fired all had bone embedded into the bullet, which the ballistics expert and forensic expert said would always be the case if this bullet had been fired through someone's head. So, big problems. And that bullet also mysteriously appeared in the garage out of nowhere after several searches had occurred, and on the day that the suspect cop showed up to participate in yet another search. Okay, so you see time after time with the evidence these huge problems that look like a big frame-up job. So that, why, you say, would the cops do this? Or someone else? Well, if someone else did the murder, they knew it would be easy to frame Stephen Avery, because the cops would want to bust him, because they're facing a $36 million lawsuit and humiliation for the earlier conviction that was erroneous. More gum, Broomgilda. And so there would certainly be some motive. By the way, Stephen Avery's current lawyer, this is off topic, what's her name? I wrote it down because I'll forget. Kathleen Zellner. Looks an awful lot like an older version of Dexter's sister, Deborah. That's just a little aside. You tell me if you've watched the documentary and seen the series Dexter about a sociopathic protagonist serial killer. I know that sounds strange. Dexter, by the way, would say the blood spatter evidence in this case clearly indicates Stephen Avery could not have committed this crime. I don't know if I have time to get into the reasons why. You'll have to watch the documentary. Now, does all this mean that I think these guys are innocent of this crime? Here's what I'm going to say, because I don't want to weasel out on you and give no opinion at all. Let me preface by saying this case has been very polarizing in the public square, sort of like politics. People line up passionately on one side or the other, and then they scream at each other. And I mean, literally, I've seen video of protesters saying, free, Avery and Dassey, and counter-protesters screaming at them saying, why are you letting Netflix brainwash you? Right? Let me just say, before I give you my opinion, I'm not done with the series yet. I'm in season 2, episode 6 or something. And so I'm gonna reserve final judgment, but Here's what I think. I think, first of all, this documentary series is really, really well done. It does get a little boring because when you've got 20 hours of stuff, time to fill, there are times when it's not super exciting. Showing the mom and dad and their reactions and, this and that. But overall, it's very well done. They do a great job of showing how bogus, and I haven't even scratched the surface on how badly the evidence was mischaracterized or mishandled or planted or fabricated or misinterpreted for a wide variety of reasons that you'll see if you watch. However, all that said, and it does appear like they coerced a confession out of a poor dim-witted kid who was underage, pretty much retarded, and was being promised he could go home if he would just say what the officers wanted to hear. All right? But in spite of all of that I just said, I think right now as it stands, I would place a higher probability than not that these two guys are indeed guilty of the crime. However, there was a lot of they didn't get a fair trial. Brian Dassey did not get a fair interrogation. In fact, in his case, where we are so far, is a federal judge threw out his confession because it was coerced. He was underage. He was not of, shall we say, normal range intellectual capacity, and he had no adult there to represent him, no attorney, no parent in the room when they were twisting and turning his poor jellified brain. However, that doesn't mean he didn't participate in this murder. And there are some disturbing things when you watch him. If you watch the series, watch the interrogations with a skeptical eye, both from the perspective of is he innocent and is he guilty. One thing he does, his body language is very, very clear, is he seems to be very ashamed of something. He looks down the whole time, won't make eye contact, looks like he's really, really ashamed. Like a puppy dog that just stole the roast off the dinner table, And that's odd. And then he says things that are beyond his intellectual capacity to dream up. Like, for example, when he's confessing, he says that the girl said, "Don't do this. Do the right thing. Help me out." This kid has zero creative or intellectual capacity to make up elements like that in a story. And so that gives me pause and seems to me to be a red flag when it comes to presumption that he's innocent and that his confession means nothing. I find the same problem with Stephen Avery. Yes, most of the evidence was misused possibly planted, misinterpreted, and a frame-up job. But that doesn't mean he's innocent of the crime. It may mean that the cops were misbehaving to make sure he was convicted. Or it may mean they did an incompetent job of handling the evidence, remember, or interpreting it. It's a small town, these things don't happen there. There was a zealous prosecutor named Ken Kratz, who, in my view, is a creep of the highest order. He has an ASMR voice, and yet it grates on me like fingers on a chalkboard. So if you watch the series, you'll see what I mean. There's something about that guy. Oh, he was busted for sending lots of inappropriate emails to a sexual violence victim who was in his court, making all kinds of indecent propositions. So he's not an ethical guy either. Anyway, the whole series is very interesting. The reason I have trouble, in spite of all the bad ways that his trial came about, I have trouble truly believing he's innocent because Stephen Avery has a history of violence against women and bad behavior. He ran his own sister off the road because he was angry, using a vehicle. Maybe worst of all, in my mind, he poured flammable gasoline or something all over a cat and lit it on fire just to watch it burn to death. Sorry to be so graphic in ASMR, but I'm telling you why I find it difficult to give this guy the benefit of the doubt when there's so much incriminating evidence against him. However, I would say, if you want to see an interesting crime story documentary series, if you want to have your brain wrapped like a pretzel with confusion over guilt or innocence, if you want to see a clear case of mishandling by not very ethical authority figures, including the cops, the court system, the sheriff's department, and some appellate court judges, and how they treat the evidence in this case, and yet also ask yourself, could this guy really be innocent? What is a credible alternate theory? I haven't been able to find one. There's possible theories. Brian Dassey's brother may have done it, Bobby Dassey, and planted the evidence. Some guy that owns a big adjacent property where the body may have originally been. Big quarry. Maybe he did it. Maybe her former roommate who had the hots for her did it. There are some alternate theories, but none of them seem to really fit the pieces of evidence well. So, I'm only so far into the series. I'll watch it till the end, then I'll give you my final opinion later. But we'll do a Jodi Arias follow-up between now and then. I was supposed to try tingles with this bubble gum. Let me try again. Very small bubble, not very satisfying. Let me see what this says. I haven't chewed on Big League Chew in quite a while, and I need to stop thinking about murder and all that. Something happened in a ball pen one summer night long ago. Portland Mavericks left-hander Rod Nelson came up with a fun new bubblegum idea. Shredded gum in a pouch. You know, as a replacement for chewing tobacco. Today, Big League Chew is still the fun gum that keeps your mouth from getting dry when the game is on the line. Oh, maybe I should chew this when I play poker. By the way, I won last night's poker tournament, and it was a very gratifying win because I played well in it. But I gotta tell you, I made one play that I was so unhappy with that it's still bugging me like crazy. Instead of telling you about it, maybe I should save this for the poker tutorial and lay it out. I got outplayed by my opponent, and I'm here to admit it. Okay? And I shouldn't have allowed that to happen. Luckily, it didn't cost me the tournament, but it came so close to costing me the tournament. It was a key hand where I got bluffed off the pot and folded. Okay, that happens frequently in poker. And normally it wouldn't bug me. But in this case, it bugged me because I should have known in this case that I was getting bluffed. Alright, so anyway, gotta go for now. Take care, everyone. Don't ASMR and drive. Until next time, I hope this video relaxes you. Alright, bye-bye.